I'll call the meeting to order. Can I get a motion, please, that the agenda for the September 18th, 2018 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Sorensen will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that the minutes of the August 21st, 2018 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented?
I'll make a so.
Councillor Bevan makes that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. We have no public hearings tonight and no delegations. We're going to move on to reading of bylaws. Can I get a motion, please, that council give first reading to bylaw number 2225, an amendment to land use bylaw number 2070 to include cannabis-related business uses and regulations, and set a public hearing during the regularly scheduled council meeting on October 16th, 2018. And Councillor Chenard will make that motion. And we have our new Planning and Development Manager, Martino, here with us. And I know we have a number of members of the audience here tonight interested in this topic. So, Martino, if you want to give us an update of where we are on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. As you know, the town of Edson is looking at a cannabis framework for legalization, which is being put forward by the federal and provincial governments. Just as some history, the Cannabis Act is approved and it becomes into effect on October 17th, 2018. The federal and provincial regulators address issues primarily dealing with production, marketing, sales, and other regulatory and taxation requirements. However, municipal governments have been recognized through the framework by the provincial and federal governments as having a role. In looking at the role the senior governments look at for the town of Edson is that we must have municipal land use bylaws which address issues related to taxation, retail locations and rules, public consumption, and land use zoning. Specifically, what we'll be dealing with in this bylaw is the retail locations and rules as well as the land use zoning. We would be required to issue development permits. We have confirmed through the changes to the Alberta Liquor, Gaming, and Cannabis regulations that AGLC will require our approval prior to a completed application being accepted by them. However, and there's some regulations that we have to adhere to at minimum. Those being a minimum of a 100-meter setback from school locations, land reserved for schools, and approved hospitals, which is a specific definition of the province as well. And they will adhere to any of our additional setbacks. However, we must meet at least their minimum requirement. So in looking at that, we have undertaken some engagement with the community. There was web-based information on our website and available should people come in and ask for it. There was 2 open houses, one held at the end of July and one in August. Unfortunately, those weren't as well attended as we had thought they might be. There was 11 total public participants that were not affiliated with the town or other government organizations. There was a survey that was open from July 18th to August 29th. That got a great response. That was available online as well as at our civic facilities. And we got 635 responses through that. Out of those 635 responses, if you adjust for persons under 18 years of age, that's close to 10% equivalence of our electorate. 85% of the respondents identified as being a tax rate payer or resident of the town of Edson. The majority of the respondents, when providing their demographic information, noted that they are within the prime working years of 24 to 55, and that's about 75% of all respondents, which is a little higher than their total number from a demographic breakdown of the town itself. Only about 59% of people are between that age group in the town. So we have obviously had a higher level of interest from that group. Generally speaking, the bylaw provisions were acceptable based on the responses that we got. Either people were either supportive or neutral on the regulations that were being proposed. There were some divisive issues. The one that was very clearly divisive was the issue of cannabis lounges. Even breaking that down by demographic data that we were able to gather from the survey, it was pretty much a split. People just simply disagreed almost 50-50 on this issue, with close to 40% liking it, 40% hating it, and then the other percent saying they don't care or they don't really have an opinion. So the next one was home growing. And that one was not divisive as to whether people could undertake it as much as where people should be able to do it. I understand that that will be addressed through a separate bylaw, as it isn't something that we would permit or license from a planning and development perspective. It'd be more of a community standards type bylaw or a provincial regulation for the amount that you're allowed to grow in your own residence. So in looking at them, some of the discussions around setbacks set out a constraints area that was close to covering the entire zoning districts that have been put forward. In looking at what types of setbacks and restrictions we had advertised and spoke to about the public, as well as looking again at the regulations and the requirements of the province and trying to find a meld of those. I mapped out what we were really looking at when we were being discerning on meeting the requirements of the province, maybe exceeding those a little bit more, but also making sure that we allowed for this use to exist somewhere within the community. So rather than just dealing with approved hospitals, which would simply be just the hospital, the general hospital, under the definition of the province, we included all AHS facilities. So if that means you're going to the public care network or something like that, it means that you can access those public health facilities without this being a use that's in proximity. We've included schools as required by the province. We've included daycares as a recommendation throughout the process of public consultation. We've included public facilities such as parks, which some might be usable for school sites, but we've included them because it was something that was always expected. Also, we've included government offices because if we're going to follow the tack that people should be able to access government services without having to be in proximity to these types of uses, it says that they should be able to visit their federal, provincial, or municipal offices without having that same impact. With that, also, one standard that we have, which is not required by law, but we have included based on early recommendations, was setbacks from other cannabis uses. The only thing not mapped on here or not considered on here is the setback from other cannabis uses. That will have an impact of reducing the density of these types of uses from each other, so making sure that they are spread out. It will also limit the number of businesses which could be located in Edson as a reaction to that. As noted as well, these represent a 200-meter setback, and this is just a graphic I threw together, so it's not exact. But this is approximately a 200-meter setback, not the 100 meters, which is the base minimum for the province. Within the bylaw, we also note that we have included accessories because that is a defined product which can't be sold to people under 18, can't be marketed to people under 18, and therefore is a regulated device. So we've included those as only being allowed as part of a cannabis retail store under the draft bylaw before you. Also, we have included an option for public referrals so that if someone applies for cannabis-related business, we would refer it to the landowners within 200 meters so that they could then be aware of the application. If they wanted to go through the regular process of dealing with appeals or contesting the issue, they can do so through a regular process, which is allowed under the Planning and Development Act. That referral process, I will know, will also always send one to the RCMP, so that should they have an opinion on the location for any specific reason, they could provide that information to the Development Authority. I'll note that anytime one of these is approved, also, it is a discretionary use, meaning we are not obligated to issue a permit. It is at our discretion, and that discretion can be appealed to the SDAB. The other issue we dealt with was we initially approached this entire issue hoping to only deal with places that had been approved by AGLC in advance. We found as we looked at the later renditions of the bylaw and re-reviewed the regulations, we would be essentially creating our own problems with that process, since AGLC requires our municipal permit in advance, and they would adhere to the standards that we put out in those permits, whether that be for operating hours, location setbacks, so on. So in other words, to be able to effectively integrate with AGLC's approval process, we instead switched to requiring that they provide us the certificate of incorporation for their business. One of the requirements is that they have a separate standalone business, which has been vetted by AGLC. They can undertake that process in advance of having a completed application. It's part of their complete application. So essentially what we're doing is we're trying to make sure that people who are applying for these uses are serious, they've gone through some vetting process and passed those hurdles. It's unlikely that someone will go through the efforts of incorporating a business specifically for this use and then not be a valid or a serious applicant to the municipality, because we will have our own costs and processes that are involved. The other benefit of using that process is that should we be refused their application, that does not nullify their ability to use that corporate incorporation and apply for an application elsewhere within the community at a different site or in a different community. So there's no loss to that applicant. Now, some new information which I was given earlier today, thanks to our news broadcasting, is that, one, I did know that the federal government has not yet addressed consumables, and they do not anticipate that they would until July 19, 2019 or later. However, the Alberta government has recently refused all applications for cannabis lounges which have been applied for through AGLC, and they have publicly stated that they will not be approving any cannabis lounges within Alberta for on-site consumption until such time as the federal government has released its own regulations dealing with those specific issues. And so that brings me to one alteration to my report, or advisement for yourself as well, which is that in my report I did note that you have the option of approving first reading and establishing a public hearing, which would be before the date set for legalization. You could vote on first reading and it could be defeated, at which point then this bylaw is dead and we would await further direction from council. But the other one noted in there was amendment, should you have any amendments you want to undertake to the bylaw. So anticipating you may wish to remove cannabis lounges and deal with those at a future date when we know what those regulations clearly are established by senior governments, I have put forward a recommendation for wording on 2 motions, which would allow you to amend the bylaw to remove cannabis lounges as a use and its regulations. We would make those changes internally, and then if you've adopted the bylaw at the first reading as amended, we would amend the bylaw and publish that amended bylaw removing cannabis lounges, if that's your choice. You're not obligated to do so, and many communities do have cannabis lounges within their bylaws, but those were adopted prior to this announcement. So I'm available for questions.
All right. Thank you very much for that presentation, Mr. Verhaeghe. Did I pronounce your last name correctly? Verhaeghe. Thank you very much. And I'll open the floor to questions from council. Councillor Beyer.
Through the chair, to administration. So thank you very much for the presentation. I really appreciate the map that you did with the setbacks with the circles and squares. I know when you previously talked about this at a committee meeting, the number 200 meters to me seemed like a good idea, but without knowing what that looked like. And now that I see what it looks like, even if it's not exact, I feel that it's a bit restrictive to be opening for business for our community when we want, I'm speaking for myself, when I feel that Edson wants to be open for business, that I feel that this is not really helping that process. And I would certainly want to consider reducing some of those setbacks to 100, as well as, where else did I get here? Yeah, reducing the setbacks to 100 on if we can do it to other cannabis users, like the other stores that they have. That would be something I would consider. I don't know if what the rest of council feels with the daycares and schools and government offices, or how they feel about that, but I think that we're not very open for business based on what this map looks like. So.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Beyer. Councillor Sorensen and then Councillor Chouinard.
Through the chair, thank you for the presentation. It was excellent. I'm glad you brought up the cannabis lounge. My first reading through it prior to tonight, I was thinking the same thing. Let's remove the lounge wording until we have better direction from Canada. So yeah, I would be in support of that amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Chouinard.
Yes, I'd have to agree with one of the comments about the 200 and 100 meters. That makes sense to me. But the one question I have, when we limit the amount of stores, I feel it should be similar to liquor stores where there's no limit. I mean, virtually competition will take care of that. So when we're limiting the amount of stores, and I think they should be very similar to liquor stores, because we are talking about sales, not consumption, because it would be the same idea to say around a liquor store we're going to attract individuals. Well, you're going to purchase the product, so I believe we shouldn't limit the amount, and it should be similar to where the liquor stores are available.
Okay, Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair, Mr. Messino. I like that we get rid of the lounges. I like the 200 meter setback only because that if we find 100 doesn't work, it's a lot harder to go from 100 to 200. We go to 200, it's easier to come down to 100 than that. We have that flexibility to go that way easier than going back in that day. So I'd like to see that, stay. And, you said schools and clubs and that, I'd like to see as far as possible away from the clubs and stuff like that too. So I'd love to see it stay at 200 because we can come down to 100 or 150, whatever we want in that. It's easier to go down than it is up.
All right, Councillor Curry?
Through the chair, I'd be okay with the, definitely to take out the lounges, especially with the new announcements. I'd be okay with decreasing the setbacks just between the stores, but definitely not decreasing the setbacks from schools, public uses, or any of the health centers. So I'd be okay with that being decreased a little, but definitely not for public. Yeah.
All right.
I'm just
Councillor
going to
Wilkinson?
get out to Councillor Curry's. The 100 meter setback's fine by me, but not at schools. I still think it should be 200 there.
Okay. Administration, I don't know if you have any comments to any of those comments that were made or any questions?
Mr. Chairman, members of council, the only advice I'd give is that, given the complexity of the bylaw changes, I'd recommend that if you have ideas you'd like to put forth, such as reduction of the 200 meters to 100 meters, whether it just be for cannabis-related uses or for other uses as well, perhaps consider those amendments individually by motion, so that they can be approved or refused by the majority of council. And then after you have a final bylaw that you feel you've amended appropriately to meet your needs, then undertake a motion to adopt it as amended with first reading so that we can proceed with first reading and public advertising.
So we have a motion on the floor right now to give first reading to this bylaw. So what you would say is, sorry, we don't take questions from the gallery during the formal meeting until the end. So you were recommending that we approve the first reading and then make amendments, or defeat it and then make?
I would recommend you make the amendments prior to approving the first reading.
Okay. So just a matter of process to see how Derek caught. So
Yeah, thank you. So I think we have a few options here. Is the motion on the floor table can be withdrawn and a new motion could be made, which could deal with the amendments. We also, council, keep in mind that this is first reading, and that first reading can be passed, and then at the time of second reading, amendments can be brought forward for consideration. However, I think that if council is of the mind to make amendments at this meeting, that it would be most appropriate to proceed as Mr. Verhage has suggested, which is to make the motions for those amendments and then proceed to pass the bylaws first reading.
okay. Councillor Wilkinson.
With that in mind, I'd like to make a motion that we have 100 meter leeway between commercial businesses.
I just think about matter of process. We have to defeat
You have to
what's
deal,
on
you have to deal with the motion on the table.
defeat this first.
Oh, I thought we were doing
Or, yeah,
amendments and then
or
voting.
the individual counselor who made the motion can choose to withdraw.
You want to withdraw?
I'm going to choose to
Okay.
withdraw.
Okay,
Right.
that makes it a lot easier.
Well, then we might as well change the whole motion, right? And just have
Yeah,
discussion.
so you'll have to make a motion before we can have discussion. So if you want to make a motion on one of the amendments,
Okay, then my motion would be to make it 100 meter leeway between commercial businesses.
that's sell cannabis. Okay.
Yeah.
So that
hear
motion's-
that.
So Councillor Wilkinson makes that motion. Any questions, comments, or
Well,
concerns?
my question is, we'll withdraw the motion, and since there's a few things, like depending on how many, maybe we should discuss it at our next committee of the whole and bring it forward, rather than making all the individual ones.
No, this is on the agenda, so we're gonna, remember, we still have second and third reading to go through, and we have timing issues here as well, so I would not be in favor of that. So the motion on the floor right now is for the amendment to reduce from 200 to 100 meters for stores that are selling cannabis. Councillor Curry, and then Councillor Chenard.
Can I make an amendment to take out the lounges, or we gotta finish this one?
We gotta finish this motion first.
The only thing we should add, is it my turn now?
Yeah.
The only thing we add with the 100 meters, but then bear in mind the schools and stuff.
That's why I didn't say schools at all. I
Didn't
just
say
said
schools.
commercial enterprises
Okay.
that are selling marijuana.
Commercial enterprises
Perfect.
selling
Just
cannabis.
so we
Cannabis.
understand exactly what it is.
Everybody clear on that?
Yes.
This has nothing to do with schools or anything else. All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. I'll take a motion now for the removal of the cannabis lounges from the proposed bylaw.
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Chenard makes that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Now we'll make the third motion to give first reading to the amended bylaw number 2225, an amendment to the land use bylaw number 2070 to include cannabis-related business uses and regulations, and set the public hearing during the regularly scheduled council meeting on October 16th, 2018. Councillor Byer?
Before you made that motion, just to double check, we're in question to where we actually limit the amount of stores, because if I'm not mistaken, that's in there.
Mr. Chairman, just as a clarification, the setbacks from the stores to each other was essentially what limited the number of stores, because there's only so much space that they could actually locate. By reducing it to 100 meters from each other, that would drastically increase the number of stores that could potentially locate within the community.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, we're only virtually the density of the stores. So if they spread out throughout the town, and like in liquor stores, we have 7 or 8, so we could have, so we're not restricting the amount, we're only restricting the amount that are side by side.
I would say
Perfect.
we are in that you can only fit so many stores within those setbacks, but we're not specifically saying there can only be 5 stores or there can only be 3 stores. As
Okay.
many stores as can fit appropriately within the setbacks as
Then-
described by the bylaw.
Okay, then I don't have a problem with it.
And this is the minimum standard set out by the province, correct?
Mr. Chairman, the restriction from cannabis stores to each other is not a requirement of the provincial
Okay.
government. That's a local initiative.
Okay,
so
thanks
now
for
we
that
have to do it, I can
clarification.
make the motion to make the new one?
The motion.
We have a motion on the floor,
Yeah.
and Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair to the 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. time, that is the same as the liquor sales in Edson?
Mr. Chairman, yes, the regulation sets out that that is the maximum amount of time that they may be open. The actual section that deals with 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. However, does provide the Development Authority the ability to restrict those operating hours should it so choose, which means it could restrict the days that it's open or the number of hours. So even though we allow for up to the maximum, if there's a reason why we might restrict the hours of a certain store because it's adjacent to certain types of businesses or in certain areas, then we would have the discretion to do so through a regular development permit. The AGLC permit would then mimic the local development permit.
All right, any other questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. All right, moving on. Can I get a motion, please? That council give first reading to bylaw number 2218, being the community standards bylaw.
I'll make it so.
Councillor Bevan makes that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? We have Mr. Schramm that is here to speak to this bylaw. If you'd like to give us an
Yeah,
update.
just to give you a quick update, earlier in the year, we did present the community standards bylaw at the committee of the whole for council to review. What we've done since then is we have advertised to the public to get public feedback on the bylaw. We've had one request from a member of the general public. It was more on clarity. It was more to relate to the metric system. Once I explained what those distances were, they were very fine with the bylaw and very supportive of the bylaw. So having that type of feedback, only one member of the public commenting on it, we're kind of looking for council to give first reading to the community standards bylaw so we can move forward.
All right. Councillor Curry and then Councillor Sorensen.
Just through the chair, just wondering, what was the nighttime hours before? Just wanted clarity.
The nighttime hours, we left the same. I believe it was, quiet time was from 11 till 7.
Okay, no, it's just 10 till 7, and I thought before it was till 8, that's all. I was just trying to see if that was, just seeing if there had been any, but if there was no comments made.
But the difference we made is we made it consistent through the 7 days a week
Okay.
versus the Sunday time.
Perfect, thank you.
Great. Councillor Sorensen and then Councillor Wilkinson.
I was just gonna ask for through the chair, I was gonna ask for a summary of what changes were made since the last time.
That was the only change.
Oh,
All right. Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Chenard.
Through the chair, on this 3.8, you've got a person who enters the property to remedy a condition, whatever. The council takes the responsibility then of what their actions are when they enter a place, more or less, because they'll not incur any liability. Sorry.
Not a problem. That's under the interpretation of everything and guidelines and that, it's just just gonna read it here. Basically what that does is that limits the liability of officers. They're acting under the responsibility of the bylaw to enter to remedy the conditions that are there. For example, a good example is they're entering to deal with an unsightly property, they don't assume that liability that they're protected by the bylaw.
Okay, so I'm more or less thinking yards, not houses, right?
We can't enter houses.
Oh, you can't,
We
okay,
cannot
good.
enter
Okay,
houses.
good, I'm happy then, that's fine, yeah, okay.
Councillor Chenard.
Actually, through to Al, Protective Service and trying to thing. Enforcement and penalties, we had discussed before, like a lot of times our goal is we want people to do it. So our first thing would be a warning, and then second, and then if you get a third warning, then we increase the fine. I have a note on that, but I don't. did
Yeah,
you
basically,
break
we
that
still
down?
enforce this bylaw with the guiding principles of enforcement, which is education, information, and enforcement.
Correct.
Educate the general public as to what the bylaws are, give specific information to the individuals who are in violation and failure to get that remedy, then we go to the enforcement side, which is the ticketing. The bylaw also gives us the ability to do cleanups. So in the past, what we've done is we would just do the cleanups and issue the costs for the cleanup, but now with the new bylaw is we have the ticketing mechanism in place as well. So it was easy for residents to just say, well, the town will come and clean my sidewalk of snow and I'll just pay the fee for the cleanup. But now we can also to issue the ticket in coordination with that. So the ticket plus cleanup costs will hopefully get better compliance.
So that's what I'm saying, like on the ticket thing, you're exactly right, we'll use cleaning of snow if, you know, in the past, oh, well, the town's not gonna care. So it's sort of an area, if we have a problem area, of what you said, the education, enforcement, and make sure they're aware of it. First ticket may be a little one, but if they're, someone that's always doing it, so if the fine was 50 and it goes to 500, now it takes note, because you're right, we can't just give a ticket and clean, because people use this as a cleaning service. So it's sort of an enforcement tool for extreme that we can impose, and I had a note on it, but I don't figure, but if we're working that direction, that makes 100% sense to me.
All right, thank you, Councillor Chenard. Any other questions, comments, or concerns?
Been answered.
All right, hearing none. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council adopt the amendments to policy OSL-1, including the revised test of burden worksheet as presented and attached to administration?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, you just moved over item 3 of the public conduct bylaw.
Item 3.
Yeah, you went from.
Okay, sorry about that. Can I get a motion, please? That council give, too many bylaws tonight. That council give first reading to bylaw number 2219 being the public conduct bylaw. Councillor Byro will make that motion. And Mr. Schramm, do you want to give an update on this one?
Virtually the same update. We presented public comment at the same time we did community standards prior to the summer, advertised the bylaw through the community. We've had no public feedback on the public conduct bylaw. I want to stress the public conduct bylaw deals with the behaviors of people. A lot of these bylaws were developed in consultation with the RCMP. They felt it very important to have these tools for enforcement, but it also gives our officers to enforce as well. So we're looking for first reading so we can move forward with this bylaw.
All right, any questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Sorensen and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I believe I made this comment last time I read this as for bullying 4.2 as well as fighting 5.2. I don't think we should be having a bylaw that's against watching a fight. It's okay for the newspaper reporter to watch it. It's okay to watch it as a witness, but if you just watch it for some other reason, you're in contravention of this bylaw. So I find it hard to believe that we would ever enforce this just for watching. I think that's hard to avoid.
All right, thank you, Councillor Sorensen. Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, that 8.2, no person shall spit while it's at any person or on any public or private property. And I just watched a hockey game there in Whitecourt on Saturday, and that hockey player spit on the ice. Like, I think it's common. And that is a public place. Like, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
would that
If I may,
be
so
Go ahead,
encompassed?
CO.
we are not obligated to enforce, but
Oh,
we
all right.
can enforce,
Okay.
right? So if someone was to come and spit on the town office front doors, that's a little different than
Yeah,
someone
it's
spitting
just
on
it
our.
is
As a
public
runner, I
place.
will confess,
You
I have
spit,
occasionally
spat.
spat on town property as I run along the trail. So I think that this is more just gives us the ability, if someone is doing it in a vulgar or derogatory or nuisance type way, that we can address it, but it doesn't force us to go after frivolous kind of activities there.
Councillor Chouinard?
Just to respond to actually Councillor Sorensen's comment on watching what the RCMP would like. It's sort of a form of crowd control. If they think, because we've had in the past, there is going to be a fight, then it gives them a tool to say, hey, what are you guys watching? So it's not really intended to ticket someone for watching a fight, but it's to give them virtually crowd control. They can say, hey, you guys can't hang around. So that's what they were kind of looking for over the years. So that's what the intent is.
Yes, and to Councillor Chouinard's point, when the bullying bylaw came into effect, around that same time we had an incident in our community where certain individuals decided they want to start beating up on people. They would videotape it and post it to YouTube.
Yes.
This gave the RCMP a tool to deal with that, as these were young adults. Don't want to necessarily give them a criminal record for just being silly, and this allowed them to deal with that in a less harsh way than a criminal code sort of charge. So that's the purpose of it. It's not they're going to go out there and you're watching a fight and they're going to just start issuing tickets. It's more of a prevention tool more than anything. So, any other questions, comments, or concerns? I have no concerns with this. I think it makes it a lot clearer. I know we had bylaws all over the place beforehand, and this will certainly make it a little bit more simpler and more clear, and I'm in support of this. So, and I haven't had any feedback from the public on this bylaw either. So, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. All right, moving on to reports from administration. Can I get a motion, please, that council adopt the amendments to policy OSL-1, including the revised test of burden worksheet as presented and attached to the administration's report? Councillor Chouinard will make that motion, and we have Martino Verhage back up here if you want to speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Some time ago, council introduced a test of burden with regards to the application of its off-site development levies. The ability to have such a policy and apply such a policy, especially around the issue of when fees are applied to certain developments, is provided within the bylaw. In looking at the policy, one of the guiding principles under section 1 is that if a development or subdivision is, in the opinion of the town, likely not to place a burden on the roads and or water and or sanitary and or storm water offsite infrastructure, then the development or subdivision may, subject to the approved policies, be considered exempt from offsite levy assessment and payment obligation. As noted, there was an existing worksheet. However, it was unclear as to exactly how that was evaluated. So in looking at rebuilding that worksheet, I've asked for the person undertaking that review to justify or quantify whether they believe or do not believe that there is actually an impact being placed on municipal services for each of the required statements. I'll note that stormwater is recently taken out. That recommendation is then provided to the director, now the Planning and Development Department head, or the CAO, and that's according to the policy in the bylaw. And so after they provide the recommendation and the rationale, it is then up to the department head or the CAO to determine whether that is waived or applied based on the information that's been provided. Now, as almost a housekeeping item, the actual test of burden was not specifically placed within the section 1 threshold section, and so just to ensure that we're meeting all of the requirements, making sure it's completely transparent, I've written together a test of burden section, which is essentially approving the process that's currently in place for about a year. I'm available for questions on that, however, or for discussion.
All right. Councillor Chenard.
I would say like the test of burden is a nice positive thing to add, because when we've been struggling with this offsite levies when it first came to us a few years ago, as a council member, it was hard for us to interpret. So if we can interpret it, how do we pass it on to the people applying? So by adding in the test of burden, I believe will change a lot of people that have not been able to develop. So an example, if you already have a shop and you want to add a second one in, it helps to offset some of the cost. So the test of burden, I believe, is a very positive thing that we added. It changes a lot for a lot of people wanting to develop.
All right, thank you, Councillor Chenard. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? To Mr. Verhage, just wanted to see what kind of feedback you've had from developers on the test of burden, and is it being seen as a positive thing within the offsite levies?
Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid that I don't have the exposure and time here to speak to that.
I can certainly help out.
Go ahead, Mr. Garrett.
In the 2 weeks you've been here, this was a significant change in the dynamic of offsite levies in our community, and has been met, I think, almost exclusively with positive feedback, and has given both administration but also property owners more flexibility in how they manage potential development, and has, I think, been more true to the purpose and the intention of offsite levies as they are designed. And as Mr. Verhage suggested, what he's proposing today is to formalize in a better way a policy practice that we have been engaged in for the last year or so, and just to ensure that it has full transparency and is accessible to all those who might be interested.
All right, thank you. Councillor Sorensen.
I am in favor of this motion. I do appreciate the improved transparency of this, and I do believe that offsite levies need a lot more work in general. So I believe this is a good band-aid to get us to the next step. Thank you.
All right, call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council approve development permit application number 063-218, subject to the conditions outlined in the draft notice of decision? Councillor Chenard will make that motion. And would you like to speak to this, Mr. Verhage?
Mr. Chairman, I'll keep this quite brief. The location, which is located just kitty corner to where we are currently at the town office, is currently a direct control district, and they do have an application before council for consideration of changing that use. It is a professional office. Previously there was a professional office there. I believe it was a dentist. Now it is moving on to an accounting firm. The one new use they would like to introduce is a small surveillance suite for its specialized staff when they're staying in town, so that they can ensure that they've got some people there during the peak hours and they're watching their valuable documents. A surveillance suite is a use which is permitted within the land use bylaw. As a direct control district, you have full discretion to approve any uses within the area you would like. We'll note that that is partly controlled by your municipal development plan, but as part of the central commercial ARP area, commercial uses as well as mixed use residential development is permitted and looked at favorably. So with that, since there's not intended to be any external alteration, and you do have the authority, we've recommended approval with standard conditions. Those standard conditions ensure that we don't have any issues with the neighboring infrastructure, any unsightly concerns during their reconstruction within the building, and ensures that it's clear that it's a commercial use versus a residential use, because that will still be its primary function. It ensures that we notify them that they do have to go to highways and have a review, which I'm sure will not be a concern, for roadside development permit. And the last condition, I'm not going to go off of memory, I'm going to go right to our report, is that they will be required to follow the diagrams and frameworks that they've submitted to us. So in other words, what they've submitted is what they will proceed with.
All right. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I know with the assessment review board, We had a similar case like this where there was a surveillance suite, and then they were not wanting to be assessed as a commercial entity. So this is very clear to the people, even though the suite's coming there, it's not residential. And their
Under our-
assessment value?
Although this is direct control, under our land use bylaw, surveillance suites are always secondary or subordinate accessory to a principal use.
As long as the owner understands that, that's really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Hearing any other questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council keep the current franchise fee of 20% the same for the 2019 calendar year with ATCO Pipeline, Gas and Pipelines Limited? Councillor Curry will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Sorensen.
We have some very serious water and sewer infrastructure needs in the near future. In my opinion, we cannot allow any of our revenue streams to lessen, especially ones that we have control of. So I propose that we set our 2019 ATCO franchise fee at a predicted dollar amount equal to what it was last year. So set the percentage based on a similar dollar number that we received last year.
So, yeah, based on the memo, right now, it looks like there'll be $150,000 less revenue in 2019 if we keep it at 20%. Thank you for that comment, Councillor Sorensen. Councillor Chenard.
That part is true, but at the end of the day, the more they charge, we charge them, then it's passed on. So I believe these amounts have been going on since 2006, so I have to agree that we need more money, but at the end of the day, the more they charge us, we charge them, it gets passed on to the customer. At the end of the day, we're going to pay it anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Chenard. Councillor Sorensen.
Just for clarification, I'm not asking for the actual amount to go up. I'm asking for it to remain the same as last year, just adjust the percentage so that it remains the same as last year.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Just through the chair to administration, can we up this percentage from 20?
CEO Duracott.
Yes, thank you. We absolutely can. I believe the maximum for ATCO is 30%. 35, thank you, Kayla. So we do have flexibility there.
All right. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to administration, where were these funds going into? Is this going into an energy reserve, or how are they allocated in our budget?
Yes, thank you. I'll have Sarah confirm if I get this wrong, but our Fortis franchise fee, which is a very similar program, that was going directly into an energy reserve, but I believe the ATCO franchise fee was going into general revenue. So I think Councillor, if I may, Your Worship, I think Councillor Sorensen's concern is valid in that this is $150,000 that would have to either be to maintain existing expenditures would either have to be cut or raised through taxation or other means of revenue generation.
All right, thank you. Councillor Chenard.
Then I guess my other question, if we keep it at 20%, then is there less? Like, why did the number drop? If it's 20% in 2018 to 19, then why did the number drop?
CEO Duracott.
Yeah, thank you. As per the letter from ATCO, it's directly related to consumption and usage, and so it's based on that, and in any given year that can fluctuate either up or down. If I may, to Sarah's recollection, this is uncommon. Generally, it's kind of creeped upwards, and so we haven't necessarily encountered this dynamic in recent years. And so I do think this is an anomaly, or at least unusual. Generally, it is slowly increasing, if anything.
Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Chenard.
Okay, I'm sorry to speak again, but I do agree with Councillor Sorensen. Somehow we have to come up with the same number that we had before. And the cost of everything is going up, so if the cost of ATCO goes up, it does.
Councillor Chouinard?
Okay, but then if it's, I guess where I'm losing, if it's based on consumption, so if we had a warm winter last year, so if we charge the same percentage, we have a cold winter, so it's based on our consumption of 2019, the 20%? So gas should probably get used the same amount as it has in the past.
Thank you. Yeah, that is also a valid point. This is an estimation. We have no way of knowing. They send us an update kind of halfway through the year. And so if we were to raise the percentage intending to address the revenue shortfall there, it's possible that we may actually generate more revenue than anticipated. I would suggest, though, that ATCO has been pretty successful at there's not usually a wide spread between what they estimate and what actually happens. So it's not an exact science, but it's generally not a significant difference.
Councillor Byer?
To address the Councillor Sorenson's comment, I would be in favor of that as well, to increase it to an amount that had the same dollar amount, so people aren't necessarily being charged more dollars, but it would be essentially similar to what they were being charged before, in order to make up for some of the anticipated projects we have.
Okay. Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair to CEO. Do we not have a graph like we do with the Fortis on the 20%, 25%, 30%? Or am I thinking of something different?
We have used those type of metrics in the past. We don't have that presented here. So we wouldn't be able to give you an exact number based on a percentage, but certainly a motion that suggested a percentage that would equal last year's revenue is something that we could accommodate.
So it could be 22 or 25% sort of deal.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
Whatever it needs to be.
yeah.
All right. Councillor Chouinard, anything you'd add?
Yes, to what we're saying, then if we're going at 20%, we have to do a friendly amendment and change that and
Yeah,
not
we-
pass it, so.
Yeah, so matter of process here is that we could either defeat this motion or accept a friendly amendment. Who moved this?
Councillor Curry. I believe.
Councillor Curry moved it. Would you be willing to do a friendly amendment?
Be willing to do a friendly amendment.
And what would that amendment be?
Can we amend it so the percentage goes up so that the revenue will stay the same? for
As the
2017?
We can work with that.
2017?
Yes, 2017.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, that works.
So she made a friendly amendment to that. So we're all clear on what that motion is, right? Okay. I will be voting against it. I don't, it's hard to predict how our winters are going to be and what kind of activity there's going to be. And I would hate to see us collect more revenue than what we did in 2017. We've already hit our taxpayers and ratepayers with increases to fees this year, especially when it comes to water and sewer. I would prefer leaving it at 20%, so I will not be voting in favor of this. I think that if we want to look at recovering some of those costs, we can do so through taxation at the appropriate time. Or if we know that when we get the final numbers for 2019, our revenue is starting to decrease, say at the end of next year, then we can make those adjustments at this time. But to do that on a forecast when we don't really have any knowledge, unless somebody has a direct connection to Mother Nature, I certainly would not be in favor of this. So, Councillor Chouinard.
Just understand, so we're gonna vote first of all on the friendly amendment, then vote on the other one?
It was a friendly amendment, so no, the motion on the floor
Is it
is,
too late to do a recorded vote?
no, we haven't. If you would like, would you like a recorded vote?
Yes.
So the motion on the table is to direct administration to approve the franchise fee to ensure that it remains at the same revenue level as the 2017 ATCO delivery tariff. So, and you've asked for a recorded vote. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council approve the payment of invoice number 188660 in the amount of $479.14, inclusive of GST, from RMRF LLP for legal services rendered with respect to general legal matters.
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Chouinard makes that motion. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council approve the payment of invoice number 468647 in the amount of $157.82, inclusive of GST, from Brownlee LLP for legal services rendered with respect to a confidential HR matter?
Maybe so.
Councillor Bevan makes that motion. All those in favor? Motion carried. All right, we have no information items. Moving on to sundry. Budget summary report. Can I get a motion, please? The council accept the budget summary report as presented. Councillor Byer makes that motion, and we have Mrs. Bittner with us here. So I believe this is coming to us as a part of what we talked at strategic planning about getting quarterly updates on where we are on our budget. So do you want to just maybe go over the highlights, Sarah? Thank you.
So this one would be for the to the end of June. So I apologise for the tardiness on this. The others will come in a more timely fashion. So what we do, we go through and look at the approved budget and look at the year-to-dates, and then you get a variance by dollar value and also a variance in percentage. So halfway through the year, you can kind of look at those percentages and see if we're on track with it. So I did notice a few that may have come to your attention, and I addressed those in the memo. If you have any further questions past that or any clarification on that, I'll be open to those.
All right, I'll open the floor to questions.
Through the
Councillor
chair,
Wilkinson?
FCSS grant, does the FCSS get a provincial grant for FCSS?
Yes, they-
That's what they're talking about, no other grants available?
Yes, they get a provincial grant.
And nothing else available?
Oh, there will also be at year end the cost sharing amount from the county as well.
Okay,
But the majority is the grant that's coming from the province.
Okay, thank you.
Making that out.
All right, any other questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Byer?
Just through the chair to Sarah, thank you very much for doing this. This is a little bit how my brain works, and I really like to see the differences and the variances, and I think it is a good tool for us. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council rescind resolution number 5 passed at the August 21st, 2018 council meeting instructing administration to pursue inline pumps as a means to improve water pressure for individual affected homes in the Tiffin area. Councillor Sorensen makes that motion. First of all, I guess we'll hand it over to you, CEO Derricotte, to give us an update on this.
Yeah, thank you. As per the submitted report, administration, there was a few pieces that suggested that it would be worthwhile to go back and review this situation. One was when the tenders came back for the what we would call a more full repair and repurposing of the facility. They were significantly higher, double almost what the engineering estimate was, which was really disappointing and a little bit discouraging. Council then discussed the possibility of an inline booster pump program whereby localized solutions would be given to homeowners that were met a certain threshold for water pressure challenges. That was not met with very much public enthusiasm, I think, and so based on those two pieces of information, administration went back to the very beginning and with a kind of a renewed perspective of reviewing more what I would call immediate solutions to the water leak issue in and of itself, rather than kind of the perspective that we took, which was to consider ways where we could invest tax dollars in the best way to solve larger water system challenges that we have here in the community. That allowed us to view these things, as I would suggest, just in a new light, and things that we considered to be perhaps with too much risk or not with enough value before were reconsidered. We were able to identify a contractor that has proposed some solutions that are, I think, well within tolerance of administration for repair of a water leak. But that's what this would be, is just the repair of the water leak. It does not address the bigger picture concerns with the suboptimal use of the booster station in terms of its design and implementation. And as always, anytime you're dealing with working under, around foundations or those types of complications, unknowns can come in that compromise or make the solution more difficult or more challenging. All of those considered, administration is recommending that we would proceed with this and has confidence that this would come to at least what I would describe as a medium-term solution to the problem, which would give council and the town the opportunity to review those longer-term or larger solutions to the water system that may be addressed. In particular, when the financial investment came in with the two options there, the maximum being approximately $100,000, that is something that I think is much more in line with what we would consider reasonable to repair a traditional water break, and are much more comfortable that that is an appropriate expenditure under the circumstances.
All right, thank you, Steve Darcott. Councillor Chenard.
Yes, I totally agree with this, and my recommendation, of course, but I mean, I like option B. Last spring, we had a similar proposal brought to us, so we owe it to the people of Tiffin. It's been over a year now, so I think we gotta move forward because frost is coming, so option B is the best, is something that we recommended at a committee of the whole last spring.
Councillor Curry.
Just through the chair, can you just clarify for me a little bit the difference between option A and option B and the final outcome and what will be provided service-wise?
You bet. So option A is cutting a hole in the floor of the building and going directly down. It's about 11 feet to the water pipe and fixing the repair. Obviously, it presents challenges when you're going through a foundation, in particular when the building is small like that. Anytime you compromise the foundation, there's challenges associated with that. Also, when you get down to the pipe and expose it, you can find that the problem is more extensive than you originally thought, and we would only be working in a very, very small area and may not be able to affect a repair in that condition. However, if it is our intent to proceed with trying option A, and if everything was to go to plan, we can get down to the pipe, we can repair it, and restore service. It's quite cost effective, but it does not preclude us from going to option B if option A is, doesn't work. And option B is we would only go down about 5 feet. We would run pipes then out underneath the building and make the connection to the water line on the exterior of the building.
All right, thank you for that. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, I guess, on our previous council now, we discussed this, going outside, finding the pipe, cutting it, and bringing it back in and that, eh? I remember that, and I like that option better than that. So I know if you run the cameras down there, then you can always take a look at, how much of your line is effective, how far, where you gotta cut it, the whole works and that. It's less of a risk having people getting hurt under a building or whatever in that day. I'd rather go with option B and this and that, which I think we'd have a better, I know it doesn't solve all the problem, but it will return the pressure back to where the people will enjoy it again and that, so I'd rather go that way and make sure that we got it for sure.
All right, thank you, Councillor Bevan. Councillor Sorensen.
I suggest, through the chair, I would recommend option A. It's just a cheaper option. We need all the funds we can get. Both options, from my understanding, require us to open up the floor inside the building. One just goes down 5 feet, one goes down 11 feet. So in my opinion, if we're opening up the floor and going down, just go all the way down. If it doesn't work out, we still have option B as a fallback.
If I may also add, we're just to clarify, administration's not asking for council to make a determination on which option we would pursue. Those are only presented for informational purposes. We're asking for the project to be funded so that we can pursue the repairs.
All right, Councillor Sherrod.
Okay, yeah, that was my question, and we were voting on option B, so you've clarified that for me. So it's A or B, so either way we are going to repair?
Administration's making the request so that the project would be funded, and then administration would pursue which option they felt was most appropriate to deal with the
Okay,
situation.
because that's what I was looking for, a clarification. So what we're saying is, by passing this, we're saying approximately 100,000. Administration is going to direct engineering, whoever, to whatever sees fit A or B, but we are going to work on it then.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay,
And that would reinstate, I believe it's a $350,000 budget. which is in line with the engineering estimates. In this case, we would intend to use much less than that allocated amount.
So go ahead, Councillor Chenard.
If I'm just understanding it, so you're asking us for option A or B, and which I'm in favor of, and then we're gonna move forward and do it because it is getting cold out.
So let me clarify, Councillor Chenard.
Yes.
They're asking for us to set the budget, and they will proceed with
And
option
release
A or
it.
B, depending on what they determine is the most appropriate way of
I
proceeding.
just wanted to get
Okay.
clarification and we were understanding this.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
I'd just like to make a point. This has been going for over a year. It's an embarrassment to us.
Yes.
I would like us to get doing it.
Yeah.
If I may just add to that, I think we benefited from some really incredible patience on behalf of our residents. Normally, when something's not operating, the residents are kind of immediately irritated, but I think as a whole, that area of our community has afforded us incredible patience, and it's appreciated. Administration certainly used that time to pursue what we felt were the best possible use and value of taxpayers' dollars. However, I appreciate that that this is an irritant to those people living in that area, and we would be expecting a time frame of about plus or minus 4 weeks based on contractor availability.
All right, thank you, CEO Darracott. Just to echo what Councillor Wilkinson said, this has been embarrassment to council, and it's been quite frankly, the folks, I said this before, the folks in Tiffin have been incredibly patient, and certainly appreciate that. And that was really the one positive thing out of all this is that when we did discuss at our last meeting about the inline booster station, we received feedback and some really good questions and comments from residents, and they're very respectful in terms of their dialogue, and that really, I think, we really relayed that information back to administration. That made us really look back and come up with, I think, the most appropriate solution. I am very disappointed it's taken this long to get to this point, and I hope that in the future we don't have these delays as we've seen here in the Tiffin area. Just a question through CEO Darracott. I don't know if you know this or not, but have we had any results of the pressure testing in those residences? And what were the results of those residents?
Yeah, thank you. I won't say too much about it just because I don't want to be inaccurate, other than to say we've had requests for approximately 35 households to have their pressure tested. So far, the tests we have conducted, the vast majority of them have been over the 40 pound PSI threshold that is established as the minimum. But I don't have an exact number. I think we would certainly be happy to continue at minimum to produce a report or for council's information based on that work that we've done now. The fact that we're pursuing a repair, we probably won't pursue that very aggressively anymore, but we have generated some information that can be shared with council for sure.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, through the chair. Oh, the only report I'd like to see is that they're all working and that they're higher than the minimum, to what they restored to what they were before.
Yeah.
If I may add, so just to clarify that, it is also administration's intention that we will not be restoring it to the pressure that it was before. It was at about 90 psi. We intend to go to about a 60, 65 psi, which is a more what I would describe as normal urban water system pressure, but it will be 50% again what they're enjoying now, and certainly much closer to what they enjoyed in the past.
Yeah,
So,
basically at that pressure though, it's pretty much, I don't think you would notice that much of a difference.
that's our intention. That correct, but we'll be doing that by virtue of a variable drive pump, which can be adjusted as well. So, but they will certainly notice a significant improvement, but they may also notice that it is not as high a pressure as it was before. The main intention for that is the higher the pressure on the water system, the more risk there is for breaks and other issues that come along with it. So to reduce that, it just is prudent.
Yeah, and 60 psi is still higher than some other neighborhoods within our community, I think.
It's higher than just about all other communities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Parts of our community.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns?
Mr. Chair, I did forget that I do think it's important that I just reflect Mr. Solomon, the town engineer's perspective on this. He was a part of the review of this scenario. His opinion remains the same, that it is not good value for tax dollars to invest in the rehabilitation of that facility, and instead pursue the larger solutions to those issues. I just think it's important that I share that piece of information for council's consideration before they make a decision.
Thank you for that, Mr. Derek Cox. While I respect Mr. Solomon's assessment of that, I completely disagree. So I'll say nothing further. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that the account listing be accepted for information?
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Chenard makes that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Questions for media and public regarding items from this council meeting?
You forgot council reports.
Oh, I missed council reports. I did that again. Sorry. We'll have to back up here. Councillor
Steve Meatloaf at
Sorensen.
home, he needs to get to.
We're going back to August 21st.
I don't have the dates with me right now, but I did have a Edson District Recycling Society meeting. The decision of China to reject North American recycling has had some very serious impacts on the society and affecting their bottom line. I've been informed they will be coming to council with a request for further funds to get them through the 2018 year. So that's a serious concern. As well, I've been to the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority meetings. The RFP for the 5-year plan has been tendered. The consultant has interviewed administration from a variety of municipalities, and now they're working through those comments to develop proposed goals for the next 5 years, and we expect that final report in October.
Thank you. Councillor Curry?
Sorry, I'm trying to find myself really quickly here. I had a historical society meeting on the 30th, and just something to be aware of, their big, the presentation that they had for us on the big celebration next year. They will be coming to us, just asking for some funding. They'd asked originally, but just because a lot of the funding is based on grant funding, they will be coming to us just saying, will we come to a certain level? And they are asking 50-50 from us and the county, just because a lot of the events actually happen in the county and they will be celebrating across the county. So just, it will be coming with a bigger budget than originally we saw, just as a clause if they do not get their grants. They're really hopeful with their grants and not too worried about that. But just for them to move forward, they can't move forward without knowing that they for sure have some funding. So that will be coming forward to us. And then I just wanted to just kind of something, I think we should know things like this. So staff have already counted 12,418 visitors to the facility from January 1st to August 19th. So I just think it's really important for us to, perspective of how busy that facility actually is. So that's about that. And then just had a appeal hearing. Had an appeal hearing this last week on Tuesday. And I'm not going to talk about that because it hasn't been made public yet. But it was fun.
Councillor Chenard?
Well, I'm going to say, due to new councillors, you forgot a very important date, September 5th to 7th, something of Wofford went away
It's
for our
committees.
retreat.
It's committees.
No, but that would be,
Committee
so we're
reports
not going to
only.
report on that?
No.
No, just your committees that you sit on.
It's town business, so I guess it wasn't part of that thing, but we haven't passed it yet. So I'm reporting September 5th and 7th. I went away to retreat as normal. Community Futures on the 10th of September, my committee report for West Fraser was canceled at the last minute, so I showed up and there was no one there. So I'll report on that and Community Futures.
All right, thank
That's
you.
it, and I'll let Councillor Bevins do more.
Councillor Schumer. Councillor Wilkinson.
Community Futures.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what I should report on now, but I had on the August 22nd, the Parkland Lodge tour. I'd really urge you all to go and drive by. It's really
Amazing.
starting to look good. So I'm sure it'll be fixed up to work on in the winter. Can we mention the staff appreciation August 24th?
Go ahead, we will.
We were all at this, and
Yeah.
really it was wonderful to meet the staff. That's what I appreciate. On September 12th, don't know if I can mention that, but I went on a tour of the bike park with Kevin in the mud and at Jackie, but it was very nice. And on September 13th, which is part of my committee, I went to the 15th anniversary of the lodge in Evansburg. I didn't realize that that lodge is partially run by Evergreens Foundation and the other part by Good Sam. And so I found out that Good Sam actually started with the Lutheran Church, but now it isn't affiliated with the church at all. So very interesting. There were lots of dignitaries out piped in by bagpipes, so it was a very enjoyable time.
Councillor Bevan.
Okay, I'll stick to the script here. The 30th had an RSC teleconference meeting. September the 12th, we had a chamber meeting. And as most of you are probably aware right now, Allison is now leaving the chamber. So they're going to be looking for a new chamber manager and that. She'll be sorely missed. She done a lot of good stuff down there. Was always out in the community, talking to the business people and everything else. And she gave us a good tour when we went out with them and that. So, I mean, she was just really great down there, but she's going to a different place now and that. Some things to mention is on November the 30th is the kids movie. December 7th is a Santa Claus parade. December the 8th is a Christmas party. October 12th is a business awards gala and that. And they're getting some, a lot of nominations in for different things in that, so it's coming along really good in that. On the 13th, I had another IRC teleconference meeting plus a Community Futures meeting. And they're interviewing the second round for the business visitation study here. And they've done 140 of them right now. But what they're finding is that 20% of vets and business people is refusing to talk to them. They just come up to the door and they just say politely, please leave my property. We do not want to talk to you again in that. So I'm not sure whether these 20% are having problems staying open, keeping employment or whatever. They're going to close their doors. They're trying, so I'm not sure what it's going to go to yet, but they're going to keep going to the other. I think they had 350 or 400 they interviewed last time. So far they're up to 20% of these people not letting them in to find out how their business is going, which is too bad because if the business is kind of going south, they do offer business coaching and stuff like this and that to help them back out to maybe get their business back to where it was or growing again or something like this. So with some business people that are not taking advantage of this and that. They have a conference coming here on the November 7th and 8th in Jasper. The Women of West Yellowhead Connecting and Building Capacity Conference. That's filling up too. Tables are being booked right now. Let's see. And that's my report.
All right, thank you. Councillor Byer.
Okay, so I'll just stick to the boards that I attended. On September 13th, I had a Yellowhead Synergy meeting, and I did send you guys a little note about a few of the details there, since there's a lot and lots of really great things to hear about at that meeting. If any of you want to attend, then certainly would welcome that. On September 14th, I attended the Power of Libraries conference that had exceptional information that directly related to the board, the staffing, and other libraries. They had lots of ideas that other libraries are using that are extremely successful, and I'm certainly not shy to steal those ideas and bring them here if they would be successful. So definitely a really, really great conference. And then September 18th, just earlier this evening, another library committee meeting.
Thank you. And none of my committees met over the last 2 weeks, but I did attend 9 different events, which I won't talk about. So
Talk about the mud.
no.
Can I add something really quick to my community?
Oh, jeez.
No.
Kelsey
Because
Curry.
I would be just not doing them service if I didn't. They are making an escape room at the
library.
at the museum. Yeah, for October, and council is definitely invited, and I definitely think we will challenge the county council
Ooh.
also to
Good,
see which
good.
councils can get out of the escape room the fastest.
Councillor Chenard.
Just a comment, I know it says on here council committee reports, but I also feel when, like your comment, when we do represent the town, we don't have to go in great details, but I think it's value to the public to say, yes, I attended as your councillor, as mayor. It does take a lot
Thank
of
you,
time.
Councillor Chenard. We discussed this at retreat, and
We didn't pass it.
we decided that we are going to stick to the committees we're on, and then if you are attending any events outside of that, such as the events I attended, then you can do that on your social media just to bring our meetings a little shorter and a little bit more efficiently. So we can talk about it more at organizational meeting if you
Not a
like, but
problem.
Oh,
that's,
good, because we are
yeah.
transparent.
So, Councillor Bevan.
I guess I just got for one thing at the Community Futures West Yellowhead. The round table was, again, about cannabis and that. Jasper had their open houses, and they had, what did I say to you, 400?
What?
650 residents came out, something like that. Hinton had 250, Grand Cache had 150, and when they came to Edson, we only had 24, so we were way behind on everybody else in that, so they're getting a lot more through the parks to see what's going on and stuff like that, so, yeah, they're struggling just like everybody else is too.
All right.
No, this is towards community futures, I forgot that thing, but that training date coming up, remember there was openings, we're looking for people who wanted to train, a lot of our counselors coming, do you have that date, training?
This is October 24th?
Yes, because I forgot the paper in my truck, so that's why I'm
Yeah.
asking you the date, because there was openings encouraging people to come out, if you have that date.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to questions from media and public regarding items from this council meeting. Go ahead, Mr. Moore.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Public hearing for cannabis on October 16th. Does anyone have concerns that its public meeting is so close to the ratification date of the...
So I'll be happy to speak to that. Obviously, we had to go through our process, as has been outlined by several agencies, including the RCMP, municipalities, provincial governments. The federal government pushed this through really quickly. We don't even have all the rules yet that they're going to be bringing forward. And they just did a whole bunch of regulations only a month or two ago, which really held up municipalities. So we are in the same mix as every other municipality out there, for municipalities our size. Obviously, we're trying to get this done as quickly as we can. And I think that October 16th will be the time for the public hearing, and at that point, we can pass second and third readings if we see fit. So I know that there's people looking to set up shops in Edson, which is, I think, positive from an economic point of view, and we're certainly aware of that. And but it's also important that we get this right and we hear from the public. So just a matter of a process that we have to follow.
Yeah,
Okay.
Oh, and a second question. The ATCO franchise fee, what was the recommendation and the motion on that?
So the recommendation that passed is for administration to set the rate equal to what the 2017 revenue was for the franchise fee, based on 20%, and the estimated 2019 consumption, we'd see a loss of around $150,000. So bumping up that percentage to make up that difference. And that passed with a 4-3 vote.
And what's the new percentage then?
Administration will have to work those numbers, but I think probably around 22%. Rough math in my head.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, or concerns related to, or I should say questions related to this meeting? Yes, ma'am, what's your name?
Hi, I'm Kim Kirkland.
Hi, Kim.
Hi. Sorry I'm late. I was told to be here. Apparently I was told incorrectly. In regards to reports from administration for motion to approve H&R Block to move.
H&R Block to move.
Oh, sorry.
Into the dentist.
Oh, yeah,
Into the
yeah.
building.
So that was approved.
Oh, thank you very much. I was told to be here later.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gentleman in the back.
If I may, so Mr. Mayor, council members, I should have had a delegation prepared before tonight. I come to you as a cannabis retailer, also as a former resident of Edson.
Okay, so just one more, or if you're asking a question, that's fine. If you want to provide comment, you can do so at the public hearing on the 16th.
Okay.
Okay.
So I guess my question to the council members would be, in regards to the current setbacks or what was spoke about tonight at the table, it seemed kind of one side and then the other in regards to setbacks. Is there going to be clarification at second and third reading or at the public hearing prior to second and third reading in regards to that?
Yeah, so administration will be bringing back those amendments, and that will be at the public hearing on the 16th.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Verhage would be happy to discuss any of those details with you.
Thanks.
Sure. Want to state your name and?
Linda Kennedy, and my question is, yes, I'm a real estate agent and I do have interest in a location that I have listed for cannabis retail. And I want to know, since you're not making any decisions until October 16th, where it is legalized in Canada the next day, October 17th, probably mere hours after you have made your decision. I want to know how long after that do you believe the town will be accepting applications for that?
Mr. Verhage, maybe you can speak to that? Put you on the spot.
Mr. Chairman, generally speaking, once you pass the bylaw, it takes effect of that day. So on the Wednesday at 8 a.m., we would be able to accept applications, provided, of course, they provided the form, the fee, they had a copy of their certificate for incorporation for the site. We could start accepting applications that morning. And I know of several proponents that do have their incorporation papers who've approached us, and several that don't yet. I'll note that at the committee meeting, next committee meeting, I was planning to bring forward an item which would address some of the juggling for how those are processed, since I imagine we may have several proponents proposing areas that conflict with each other. So.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may just add to that, I think it's prudent that we err on the side of pace is slow and steady, and we want to ensure that we get good regulations, good processes in place, and those who are interested certainly don't have to wait until the bylaw is approved to come and talk to town administration, in particular Mr. Verhage, to get all information prepared and ready to go, so that as soon as the bylaw comes into effect, assuming council passes a bylaw that evening, it would be immediately.
So you're saying open for business October 17th?
As long as council was to pass that bylaw. However, I would add to that, we do not have a time frame for how long the processing will actually take, because that will be our first time at processing these types of requests and dealing with it, and so there may be some time, obviously as reasonable as we can make it, but we don't have an idea specifically how long that may be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you everyone. I'm just wondering how I can actually get a meeting with you or talk to you.
I'll let you two deal with that separately.
One more comment,
Yeah.
not to oversee Mr. Verhage, but as a cannabis retailer who has several applications across Alberta, clarification on the application process goes like this. So we have to apply to the Alberta government, the GLC, with our first application. With that first application, we have to have an intent to lease or a lease signed. Then they see that application, they post that application. Then we have to come to the municipality that we expect to open it. Then we apply for a development permit. The AGLC posts those because they understand the timeline and things like that. So the development permit is the third step in the process. Then we get the development permit. When we receive a development permit, we bring that back to the AGLC. The AGLC then gives us a letter saying that we've passed due diligence with the AGLC. We bring that letter back to the town. The town then gives us a business license to then be ready for October 17th or whichever day the municipality expects to process those licenses. That's the route that the other municipalities have had structured throughout Alberta. So just for clarification, we can apply. I currently have an application in within this town. There are 3 already, so that's kind of where it sits.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. All right. We'll ask a question. Motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Councillor Chenard. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you.